Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start the second day of the conference. I see that most of us have survived the last evening, so it's very good. And let's push the e-governance ahead, as our slogan says. And let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity, because these days, every time we speak about e-governance and information society development, then cybersecurity is a logically part of that. We all know that cybersecurity has become a very important topic in recent years, and of course there is a reason for that. We have seen how nations have developed their information societies. People are using more and more different IT tools. Governments and businesses are developing electronic services. We have connected our critical infrastructure to the network. So we have created kind of cyber organism for the nations. And now we have to think how to protect this organism. And we have to find a comprehensive way to protect these infrastructures. And logically, all these developments have created an issue for the security planners. And we have witnessed several cyber incidents in recent years. We have seen how countries have been attacked. We have seen how organizations have been attacked, how critical infrastructure has been attacked. Also, recent years, we have talked a lot about cyber spying and what to do about that, how countries could maintain the cyber sovereignty. So we have a lot of questions in the air in the cybersecurity field. And today we want to touch at least some of these questions. Of course, not all, but at least a little bit, scratching the surface. And I'm very glad that we have a very good panel today here for three different countries and from one company. So we have, first panelist is Mr. Matthew Johnson from Guardtime. He's the Chief Technical Officer. And Guardtime is one of the futuristic companies which develops state-of-art cybersecurity solutions. So it would be very interesting to hear what he has to say about the current situation and future developments. Then we have Mr. Vitaly Tarlev from Moldova. He is the Deputy Minister at the Ministry of ICT, and currently Moldova is dealing with their national cybersecurity strategy development. So this is one of the topics what is on the Vitaly's table at the moment. And then we have Mr. Georgi Tielidze from Georgia. He has the cyber police background, working many years at the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and now he's the advisor at State Security and Crisis Management Council. So basically, he acts as a national cybersecurity coordinator, and he's dealing with the cybersecurity strategy and orchestrating all these different activities in different institutions in Georgia as well. And finally, we have our own guy, Marko Künnapuu. He works as the advisor at the Estonian Ministry of Justice, but what is more important is that he has been several years the chairman of the Cybercrime Convention Committee at the Council of Europe. So he has very practical and also theoretical and political policy-making background in Estonia and also internationally. Regarding the questions I'm going to ask today, I'm not going to give a floor to the panelists for too long time. I have 5 questions, 5 main questions, and the first question is quite classical. The question is related to the cyber threat. How do we understand it? Because it was years ago when I was myself, there were in London, there was a conference, and we were in the same panel with one of the security experts who kind of said that, you know, the problems you had in Estonia in 2007 and later, these were actually exaggerated. The cyber threat is not so big. So the question is about, do we exaggerate cyber threats, or we underestimate them? Do we understand them as icebergs under the water? So we don't know everything, but we kind of feel that there is a threat, but we cannot describe it exactly. Or is it like a small fish which has this, pretends to be a shark? So the question is simply that how to create the relevant threat picture at the moment. And let's start with Mr. Tarlev. How do you see that? Do you feel that generally in the world and also in Moldova, people, or especially the security people, they exaggerate cyber threats, or it's vice versa? We underestimate. The threat is actually bigger. Please.
Thank you, Raul. First of all, I would mention that the main goal of ICT public authority in every country, not only in mine, is oriented to raise the question at proper level, to balance the policies and to educate politicians as well as society that in cyberspace is almost like in real life, and the same threat on the street is present in cyberspace. The same approach should be applied in both cases. First of all, we're interested in promoting development of information society. The main threat from our point of view at this stage is that we do not have to harm the trust and confidence of population in using ICT. That's why government should take measures, should impose soft regulation in order not to make people to get distant from new tools, but to promote public awareness campaigns, to educate people and society that some necessary measures are imposed by the government. Some of them are not necessary at some stages. Just an example: a few weeks ago in Moldova, we had an incident, cyber security incident in one of the biggest private companies. It was a company which provides services, access to internet services. So our main concern was that the market can suffer from imposing too strict measures on this company, because it has some merits on developing competition on IT market in Moldova, on access to internet market in Moldova. It brought us to low prices, to high speed of internet for who is interested. Moldova was for a very long period of time in first 10 countries in the world by medium speed to internet, access speed to internet. So and it remains, it's on 11th place now. And it happened thanks to some private companies which invested enough in this field. But at the same time, this company was not so concerned about cybersecurity issues and securing data of clients. We have a leak of 150,000 clients' personal data. We were afraid that the company will have serious troubles. So we had to equilibrate the policies of different public institutions in order to keep the balance between necessary measures to be imposed and between the necessity to keep access of clients to that service. So this is the situation where we had to demonstrate that we have to keep a balance and not to exaggerate.
How do you feel that does the political leadership understands that there is need to invest more resources to the cybersecurity, or how is this situation?
Actually, in this situation, for us, became very easy to promote a program on cybersecurity in Moldova. We were working on this document for about 6 months. After this incident, we got necessary inputs from law enforcement institution and other stakeholders in this process, and you had the occasion to be in Chisinau 2 weeks ago when we had this Moldova ICT summit, and the first draft of the program was presented to the public. It's a balanced European approach to how to solve cybersecurity issues in society. First goal was to impose some principles where the rule of law and users' rights are put on top. After that, there are some measures oriented to network and information systems security, minimal requirements regarding internal procedures, technical requirements, and so on. And of course, attracting other stakeholders to deal with these issues. This is about cyber defense and cyber crimes. So this is the area which this political document should cover. And of course, this unhappy incident in a private sector company was very helpful for us. Politicians and private companies very well understood where is the line. So in this during this Moldova ICT Summit session, we had full support. You were one of the speakers. I want to mention it to everybody in the room to know that Estonian case was one of the story in which every country in the region is interested. Our society also followed it and made reference to Estonian case in different areas, including cybersecurity, and how you deal in Estonia with these issues is very interesting for us. We want to have the same balanced approach in order to keep e-society developing at the same time to provide to final users necessary level of trust and confidence.
Great, thank you. What about Georgia? Georgi, how do you feel? In Georgia, the experts or security planners, do they exaggerate cyber threats or they underestimate them? You had the experience with 2008 with the cyber attacks, and you are the security expert. You are probably exaggerating the cyber threats. So why do you do that?
Thanks for this question. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the organizers of this event for organizing such a wonderful platform for exchange ideas related to cybersecurity matters, and for inviting and for giving me the floor and possibility to address to this wonderful community. As for the exaggeration of underestimation, taking into account absolutely the grave results of the Russian cyber warfare campaign waged against Georgia in the August 2008, Georgia, I would say, took into consideration the lessons learned that we already had experienced. Therefore, we are trying to be as more practical as possible, as more precise as possible in the process of, I would say, the drafting cyber threat assessment picture for our national security. And that I think that's one of the most important issue, and at the same time, this is one of the most important, I would say, challenge for the security guys while assessing the cybersecurity architecture of Georgia. Previous this war, I would like to mention that somehow previously, then in August 2008, somehow there was kind of an underestimation, not exaggeration, but underestimation about the cybersecurity sphere of the country, taking into account that we did not have so much experience in cyber security related field, and therefore there was this kind of an attitude that there was not so much attention granted to the cybersecurity pillar of the national security of the country. But the August 2008, I would say, clearly demonstrated that Russian affiliated groups organized the, I would say, the huge mass of cyber attacks against Georgia, and it has really grave results for Georgia in the information, I would say, field, in the process of informing world community what was happening in Georgia. Therefore, this example is one of the most important part of our national security policy planning, and therefore we are trying to be as realistic as possible in this process.
So how much do you invest in cybersecurity? What is the budget? Percentage-wise, for example.
As for the percentage, actually, we are increasing the budget for certain pillars, but we don't have the exact, I would say, the pillar, since we are working with donors, and somehow the large amount, approximately 50% of our cybersecurity budgeting is driven by donors. As for the exact figures, I would say there can be the couple of millions, I would say. But half of them, I would say, will be driven by donors, taking into account the economic parameters of the country. We are still in the developing stage, and we are, of course, investing as much as we can, but within the framework of our budgetary criteria, I would say.
Thank you, Georgi. Matthew, guard time's income probably depends how great threat picture you can, create. So what is actually the situation, and how much is reasonable to invest cybersecurity? And actually, I have like a third part of the question as well. That what is currently the most significant and the specific threat that organizations must consider?
Well, yeah, so thanks for your question, and thanks to the organizers for allowing me the opportunity to participate. I think that what's at stake is actually, from a nation-state perspective, it's really continuity of government. If you look at Estonia and other countries, throughout the region, bringing all of these rich set of services online and the increased use of electronic government to provide applications based on the demand of the users, what's really at stake is the continuity of government. And one of the assumptions that I have is that offense always leads defense. And so I think large in part, cybersecurity threats are largely underestimated. Hackers are a very creative bunch. Nation-state adversary attempts to exploit a nation's network are largely underestimated because we simply don't understand and are not funded to explore all the potential vulnerabilities that may exist in the network and applications. And those results can be catastrophic. I think, in terms of being able to address that threat, Estonia has set really a risk-managed framework for governance, education, and then resilience with a focus on data-centric protections and then the integrity of its systems, large in part because Estonia cares a lot about preserving the long-term authenticity of its records. And so they've put into place data integrity and data-centric security solutions that continuously verify those activities through those lessons learned. If you look at the cybersecurity landscape, it largely hasn't changed in the last 20 years. There's a massive focus on perimeter defense, confidentiality technologies, more and more increased use of encryption, firewalls, and so forth, malware analysis systems, intrusion detection, and yet we're still being attacked, right? Or those attacks are still having an impact. And without a paradigm shift focusing on integrity and data-centric solutions like Estonia has done, I think the threat will largely go underestimated, and budgets won't curtail the problem.
Another question related to Marco is also there.
Yeah.
Marco is our own person, so so much together. But I want to ask the same question from you a little bit differently. Most of the time you live in Estonia if you don't have the business trips. So you depend on the e-services that Estonia has developed. So the question is that how do you feel, how dependent we are on all these different infrastructures? And how big is the threat specifically in Estonia? Because of course there are different countries in the world. Some countries depend less on this ICT infrastructure, some more. But how is the situation in Estonia?
Thank you. And then first I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this interesting panel. As regards your question, then, I think that if you ask different people with different background, then you would get different answers. Because, yeah, you mentioned that, yeah, I'm using different e-services and I use a lot of them. So that means that I also have some sort of knowledge and I know the threats. And then I also know that when I'm not able to use them, what could be the possible consequences. But the most of the people still actually do not realize that how much the everyday life is dependent on the internet. It's just as you have this picture on the iceberg, and then there are people who know what's below the waterline, and then they know what the possible threats are, how to respond to these, and what could be the protection measures for that. But still, I feel that most of the people still underestimate the threats, because it's just lack of knowledge. And as it was also mentioned here by several panelists here, that it's about awareness raising. And you need to raise awareness at all the levels, at the individual level, at the business level, sometimes also at governmental level. And then if all these important policymakers who have influence, who can affect different processes, if they have sufficient knowledge, information, then you could clearly see what the overall picture is. Because also, for most people, they just know the threats because they cannot see what's below the waterline. And also, in many cases, in order to see that, you first need to invest a lot. That means that you first have to have some sort of organizational, technical capacity to do that. So still, my personal view is that, unfortunately, still many people underestimate the threats.
But how can we create the relevant threat picture? I have worked in the cybersecurity field for, I don't know, 10 years, more than 10 years, and it's still difficult to understand exactly that what is the threat picture, how countries can develop this like a relevant cyber threat picture. Because specifically when you don't have a lot of resources to invest to intelligence, for example. I don't know, maybe many countries have, on the ground big laboratories and many different spies who are, constantly monitoring the networks, but certainly smaller countries don't have this capability. So what is our possibilities to get at least like not 100% right, but 80%, 90%? Let's start with Matthew. You probably have some solutions for that.
No, I think there needs to be a focus, especially with the increased demand for services, to reduce complexity within the IT environment. Through increased complexity means an increased attack surface, and then through reduction in complexity, you have the ability to more effectively instrument the infrastructure and then link the machine-to-machine, the virtualization, the storage environments, create better situational awareness, and have a focus on the inside out of the network so you know when there's manipulation. And in large in part, smaller nation states have the opportunity as they come online with services to do it right the first time, as opposed to large organizations with a lot of legacy systems, adding upon that complexity. So by shrinking complexity and then effective instrumentation, you can increase that situational awareness from the inside out, so that an organization can begin to realize, where they are not being, manipulated. Again, it's that focus on data-centric solutions, real-time continuous verification as to the integrity of the infrastructure, and then linking the machine-to-machine environment to the virtualization environment to the object storage repositories that are responsible for maintaining all of that critical, data, whether it be citizen records, whether it be government classified, material and so forth. But, linking end to end and having appropriate instrumentation is key to understanding the threat.
What are your thoughts about that, Vitali?
Yeah, for sure, nobody is invisible in this area. And first of all, governments should think about prioritizing things. You can't invest all your resources only in cybersecurity issues. We should think about developing your resources, services. So you should balance both categories of spending. So yes, of course, we need to invest in cybersecurity, but at the same time, you need to use our resources and for developing resources. Of course, there are other measures of raising capacities. First of all, institutional capacities, developing national computer emergency response centers, teams. It's a solution also to share responsibilities between different stakeholders. We know there are some instruments to prevent risks. There are instruments to react after in case something happened. So you have to raise and develop capacities first of all, and to spend your resources smartly.
What about Georgia? Georgi, how do you develop the relevant threat picture in the cyberspace?
First of all, I'm completely in line with the wordings that our panelists just mentioned. And also, I would like to add that in this process, into drafting the real threat assessment picture, first of all, is that you should assess your own vulnerabilities that you have, not only in technical terms, but in the capacity terms. That, for example, if some kind of a cyber incident will happen, maybe you have sufficient technical resource or financial resource to provide all necessary assistance, but you don't have the qualified staff. Therefore, first of all, you are doing your own assessment of your gaps and vulnerabilities, what you have. And in this process also, you just taking into consideration the current threat, I would say the current threat models, what exists, what are current threats, and what are current trends in relation with these threats. So this is kind of a combination, and then of course, then in the process of planning cybersecurity policy, that it will be, first of all, should be focused on the prevention issues, and then suppression and mitigation of the results. Then you are, how to say, calculating all the issues that our panelists just mentioned, the capacities, resources, and then you are choosing the way, how to say, in which direction they will be much more sufficient to waste certain amount of money or other financial resource or the human resource and other stuff, how to say, necessary to ensure the cyber security of the country.
Yes, it has been actually great to see how Georgia has approached that issue. You have created relevant government institutions, so you have basically institutionalized some of the processes. Mm-hmm. One is how to create the threat picture and how to develop capabilities. That is great. But Marko, is it possible to create better threat picture through the international cooperation? And can we get quality information from other countries as well? Or the trust issue is kind of like, that disturbs there?
Short answer would be yes, of course. And not only international cooperation.
You might have a longer answer as well.
But also key would be national level cooperation. Because even if you think that in order to have the big picture in place, you need to invest a lot and so on. But sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes you might have different institutions already in place that are working in the field, that are collecting already information. But the problem is that information is in different places and then split into different pieces. So there has to be somebody who collects this information and uses that to have some sort of state-level picture. Plus also, as regards cyber threats, then even for big countries, the resources, they are always limited, and you need to rely on international cooperation. It's not possible to fight cyber threats alone. You have to be part of some sort of international cooperation framework, some sort of international networks. And also, if you have trusted cooperation in place, then you can also use information what you get from your partners abroad. And then by using all this information that you have at national level, what you get from international level, I think it's possible.
What about giving a better access to the security agencies, to the private information, for example? Because this week there started a discussion in Estonia whether or not we should give a backdoor for our ID card to the security agencies. So is this an option to give better access to security services for the development or creation of the better threat picture. Matthew, you commented yesterday this topic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, so one, applaud Estonia for, providing, virtual citizenship and a rich set of services to Estonian citizens as well across their public service infrastructure. If you're going to continue to provide those kind of services and you're not going to erode the public's confidence, you have to provide mechanisms to provide, true accountability, chain of custody for how those credentials are actually being used. Every, sovereign nation state has its own opinion on what it needs to protect itself. And whatever those measures are that they put in place in order to affect that, I would say that piece of accountability, that chain of custody, and then educating the citizen or educating the user with how that information is going to be used with that kind of transparent evidence has to be there to make sure that everybody is playing by the rules that they've ascribed to. It's only good to have a contract if it's enforceable, right? And if you don't have clear insights into how data is being used, then there's no way to actually validate, whether or not you can actually trust that government agency or that service partner with your information. And so that chain of custody, that accountability, and that evidence is particularly important. And in Estonia, in fact, there is a great framework whereby the public sector, the private sector, and the citizen all have the ability across the data exchange layer to mutually audit, the behaviors across the network. It's impossible to lie in Estonia about data that's been generated across that network because it's uniquely identified, and it's uniquely identified with the context of time, and so that's pretty exciting. But I think it's a long road as nation states grapple with these issues, both within the context of their own sovereignty, and then the different rules that they're ascribing to offering global internet services in conjunction with their service providers.
But it's a typical situation when nothing happens, everything, the society lives peacefully. Then of course nobody wants to give the access to the security guys, to the data. But if something happens, there's some terrorist attack or something else, then the public will accuse the security service that why they didn't do anything about it. Why they didn't prevent this, the incident. So what is the right way? What do you think, Marko? Should we give the access to the, the state infrastructure or the data person data to access to the security agencies?
It's a difficult question, and especially for me, because I'm a government official as well. But I think that anyway, it won't be some sort of silver bullet. It won't solve all the problems. And also, if we think about government services, e-services as a whole, and if we think that how much we have promoted them at national level and also abroad, then we need to think that all these services are based on trust. And if we take some steps that possibly could undermine this trust, then we need to think really carefully.
Can I add one thing real quick? Is that just with, just to backstop my colleagues' comments, thinking the problem through, imparting, backdoors into credentials and so forth, the technical, implementation measures to actually make that kind of possible results in a new attack vector, whereby a nation state can, exploit credentials and so forth. Those secrets have to be stored someplace. They have to be managed. They have to be governed. And the implementation of any program like that increases complexity and increases the attack surface, and subsequently allows, potential for abuse. And so those issues need to be carefully thought through in implementation and practice as well as governance, along with providing for the accountability or use of those types of activities in the event that a nation state decides to go down that road. It increases a lot of complexity.
Vitali, Georgi, do you want to comment this topic?
I would mention just a few lines to complete the picture. Even it's about security issues. You don't have to give it totally in hands of security guys, because we are talking here about e-society and e-security. Where is the line? Just an example. In Moldova, we have a registry, population registry, which is functional or operational for more than 15 years. Yesterday, my colleague from Ukraine mentioned that in Ukraine they didn't do that because of trust from population. But you need this kind of information in order to provide services to your citizens and so on. In Moldova, we did it in a right manner at right time, I think. This capacity was extracted from the Ministry of Interior, and civil servants were dealing with this resource, and in certain conditions, of course, law enforcement entities have access to that resource, but they are not responsible for collecting data, for processing data, and so on. This is the balance. This is a civil entity which is dealing with these processes in the interest of society, but in certain conditions, law enforcement entity have access to that. The debates on this topic are continuing, and even now, when in European Union discussions are going on for how long and in which conditions operators have to keep data, history, and so on, and to provide access. For us, of course, this is also an issue. We are implementing in a very rapid manner, I use this word, the association agreement with the European Union, and of course we transpose it in national legislation, these provisions too, but after European Court says that this is illegal, we have to come back and to make necessary adjustments into the legislation. Yeah, of course, law enforcement institution need that instrument, but the debates at European level continues, and the line is not defined yet.
Georgi, you are working at the State Security and Crisis Management Council. So how do you see, how much access do you want to this private and confidential information? Or do you want that? Maybe you don't.
Actually, this is, how to say, of course, very debating question, I would say, taking into account that a couple of months ago we had also in the Parliament of Georgia this kind of debates about the wiretapping laws and this kind of regulations, and I know that there are certain representatives of Georgian non-governmental organizations, and maybe they will get angry what I will say with regard to this. With regard to this issue, of course, I don't see the problem access per se, to have an access to certain information, to store it at least, cannot be considered as a problem. But I see the problem, how to say that, somehow a lack of proper oversight mechanisms. First of all, of course, that there should be the technical possibility that if law enforcement or security services needs information for the well-being of the citizens of the country, they should have those kind of access, but under very strict conditions, under strong judicial oversight, and also in case of law enforcement agencies, under also very strong prosecutorial oversight. So this is the common formula that I would say, but this formula can be, how to say, much more precise and can be vague. To have a judicial oversight or prosecutorial oversight per se does not mean, how to say, that the personal life of the person is guaranteed, but the standards inside there should be very high. There should be, for example, need to know, and this should be, how to say, directly related to the certain threats, and the criteria for attesting the necessity to access a certain information, this should be very high. But per se, technically speaking, the access to the data per se cannot be considered as a problem in case those requirements are satisfied.
We have already entered to the second big question, that how to balance e-society and security development. And the point why I put this question here was that last year we had a group from one relatively big country, and the e-society developers, they mentioned that if they want to implement the new features, new applications, new information society systems, then they have a strong or big problem with the security guys, because they always want to turn the security on too much. And they said that if they want to really do that, to achieve something, they are trying to avoid the cybersecurity guys, but because otherwise they will not going to implement anything. So here's the question that how to balance it. But before we enter to the question, let's see a short video clip about one of solution in Estonia.
Estonian government sessions are held in the government session hall of Stenbock House, where long-standing traditions meet innovative technical solutions. In 2000, the Estonian government discarded the old paper document-based decision-making system and opted for an innovative digital system, e-cabinet. This tailor-made solution has been designed to prepare and conduct government meetings in an electronic form, entirely without paper. In 2000, e-cabinet was based on stationary computer terminals situated in the government session hall. Today, the session hall is free of any stationary electronic devices. This means ministers can access e-cabinet simply from their own portable digital devices, be it a laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Ministers securely log into e-cabinet with their ID card or mobile ID. They can access all items submitted to government for discussion or decision. They can view the forthcoming meeting's agenda, notify colleagues on their views, or give input and even give preliminary votes on a proposal well before the actual meeting has begun. The items on the agenda with no objections will not be debated, but will be adopted by default at the beginning of the government session. The system is connected to another information system that has been designed for consulting draft legislation and other government instruments between the ministries as well as with the public. The e-consultation system. Both effectively link the different branches of government into one seamless information network. Furthermore, e-cabinet enables the secure digital signing of government legal acts and other documents. For example, all government regulations are digitally signed by the Prime Minister, the responsible minister, and the Cabinet Secretary during or shortly after the sessions. After every session, the documents are stored in an easily accessible archive dating back to 2000, when the innovative system was first established. Most importantly, e-cabinet has helped introduce more efficient decision-making procedures and has helped to save time. Before the system, sessions took 4 to 5 hours. Thanks to e-cabinet, average sessions last 30 minutes. With e-cabinet, the Republic of Estonia has created a fast, transparent and environmentally friendly governing tool that is constantly evolving to better suit the needs of our innovatively minded government.
So this is one of the examples where I think that the development of e-society and security has been very well balanced. So the question is that how to achieve that, and how to create the systems where the security is not an obstacle, but where the security is an enabler. So because I think that actually in Estonia the cybersecurity solutions are not functioning like a brakes during the ride, but they are more like innovations themselves. So how to do that? And let's start with Marko. Marko, do you think that in Estonia the security and the e-society development is well balanced, or you feel that we are kind of like paying too much attention to security or not enough attention to security?
I think that the situation is quite well balanced, and I think that we have reached quite a good compromise between security, user-friendliness, and also cost-effectiveness, because these are all the aspects you need to think about when you start developing some sort of information system, some sort of new services, because it's always there is no such thing as absolute security. You can try to have maximum security, But in fact, that would mean that it would be really unpleasant for the users to use that. And then what you want to do is you want to promote those services. So you need to think about user friendliness as well. So and then it's difficult. It's not sometimes easy to find this right balance. But the key is again it's consultations. You need to talk to different stakeholders and then find a solution that would meet everybody's needs.
Yes, but the cooperation always means that there is a saying that it takes a two for a tango. So if one side doesn't want to cooperate, how do you do that? How to balance it? How to say institutionalize the right way of doing things?
That can be also difficult, but no, idea is just not to start some sort of fight, but to create some sort of win-win situation. You can have a situation where users would win, and then also government, because this is exactly the situation like we have that users save time, and also it's cost-effective for the government, because there are certain services that government needs to provide anyway. And if it's possible to find certain ways just to cut down the costs and then make it also really efficient and accessible to the users, then I think we have a solution. But yeah, it's not always easy. And then sometimes those kind of discussions, consultations may take a really long time.
How is the situation in Georgia? Do you feel that security has been an obstacle in developing electronic society? Or you don't see that how it is balanced in Georgia?
Actually, I would say over securitization, I would say, of course, is everywhere problem. As for the Georgian case, for example, in the process of elaboration, there's certain regulations related to cybersecurity standards and requirements. I would say we had quite close and intensive cooperation with the private stakeholders as well, and with also other public stakeholders who were the main targets of the cybersecurity regulations. I would say targets in good sense, and through the cooperation and through the discussion, I would say many requirements that the government wanted to impose on them somehow was mitigated and somehow it was modified, because we took into consideration that this field still isn't developing, I would say, stage, and therefore the imposing too strict but proper security measures should not become an obstacle in the process of developing these services. Therefore, I think that we need the balancing, but balancing in a way that developing, I would say, should be somehow prevailing in order that, I would say, this process, I would say, in case this process will be stopped, then it's very difficult to relaunch it again. And therefore, we need a very certain, I would say, kind of a balanced approach to this part. We managed somehow, and I would say we are still in the process to finding some balances in certain components of e-governance and cybersecurity.
In Estonia, we have the responsibility of the e-governance or e-society development and also cybersecurity. It's in one organization, it's in one state agency. I know that in Georgia it's the same way. Your data exchange agency, which is main agency developing electronic society, they're also responsible of cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's a good approach to put these two quite different responsibilities in one organization?
I think that this is, I would say, is mainly dependent on the resources that the countries have. Taken into account that Georgia and Estonia are relatively small countries, and then therefore we have relatively lack resources. I think that this is one of the best solutions that we and in the EU organized, I would say, with regard to the e-governance and cybersecurity. And those guys that are responsible, for example, for developing e-governance issues and for working e-governance issues, they are the best to know the specificity of this, I would say, business, and they are therefore the, I would say, probably the best professionals that can I would say adjust to the certain requirements to those products in order not to, I would say, not to stop development of e-governance system in the country. Therefore, this was mainly the main reason for that was the lack of resources and also how to say those factors that those people who are responsible for e-governance also are the best in the process of adjustment, the proper security measures in this process.
How is the situation in Moldova? Because I know that your security agency is responsible of the information security, and on the other hand, your ministry is trying to promote the development of e-society. So how do you handle it? How do you balance security and the development?
Well, what is important to mention here? We need to classify information. There are different categories of information. You don't have to protect everything. You'll spend money, and as I mentioned, nobody is protected. Nobody is invisible in this area. It's just a matter of time. If somebody wants to hack you, they will do that. Almost everything which is discussed during the governmental meetings is published on website www.particip.gov.media. So you don't have to hide it. Almost everything is known before the meeting. There are just some sets of information which needs to be protected in another manner. But almost everything which is discussed there is already known. Open Data Initiative in Moldova was quite successful. Now we have published a huge amount of information. So nobody cares about it. Most of them is not, nobody is reading that information because it's accessible. The most question was to make it available. Now it's available. So you don't have to spend money to protect that. So classifying or categorizing information, this is an instrument to optimize costs. In relation with our intelligence service and the Ministry of ICT, as well as two governmental agencies which are dealing, one of them is dealing with special telecommunication in the government, another one is dealing with e-governance, so developing national governmental content, internet content. So the equilibrium so far goes well. We don't see problems so far. In some institutions, people understood that there is an issue of information security, or there is an issue of cyber security. It's about networks, systems, and so on, and it's about old version of informational security, where in the same chain they're putting infrastructure, content, access to information, and so on. We are evolving. At this stage, we are in the process of defining some criteria, and we are happy that discussions are going very well. We'll have some clear notions of different kind of information, networks, services, and what specialized institutions has to protect.
Matthew, what do you think about that balancing issue?
Just if you're going to incentivize the use of any system, you have to make security, as transparent and kind of easy to use as possible. If you want to incentivize the use and actually promote, user behavior, education is key to that process as well. How do I protect my credentials? How do I protect my identity, and so forth? But past that education and training piece, if you want to incentivize use, the technical control measures to address the data classification challenges mean that the government or the administration entity actually has to put into place very granular access and authentication controls, and then really focus on again reducing complexity within that environment, so there's better situational awareness, but also so that the systems responsible for the handoff of those access and authentication credentials and in security tokens, you actually have assurance over those systems that are managing the handling of those activities. Today, with increased complexity, we have all of this abstraction. It's really hard to get granular understanding and situational awareness on all of the APIs and the machines that are managing these credentials today. And by increasing transparency into those controls, bringing accountability into your policies and processes, highlighting the chain of custody for how credentials are exposed, ensuring that you have multi-parties actually managing the audit and administration of those activities increases confidence, and that promotes and incentivizes use. So I think it's a balance there, but if you are going to provide for that balance, you have to make these technologies as easy to use as possible to incentivize their use, and also to reduce complexity so that users don't make a mistake.
Before we go ahead, is there any questions from the participant side? Yes, please. Where's our microphones?
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Poseidonot. What is important to protect? Is it the access to the networks, or is it the information on the other side of the networks, or do we protect both? The second question would go to this security company expert. You just mentioned now that one needs to make the usability of, for example, APIs accessible so that the development can proceed as rapid as possible. Would you then encourage e-governance agencies to set up a set of protocols and set of requirements and guidelines to develop APIs so that it can only be used, that one, to access the information? Or what do you think about that? Thank you.
Yeah, let's
Go
take
ahead.
the latter question. Yeah, please.
Sure. The second question there. Yeah. So if many organizations and governments. So background. I've supported a number of nation states, both in the EU through NATO, and then also within the U.S. with a focus on the Defense Department, kind of opening up interfaces to incentivize approaches for continuous delivery systems. So API exposure and promoting open API development against a standard set of interfaces. So I think, once you open up that exposure, via those services, it becomes very important to set up standard interfaces and then develop policy frameworks around those interfaces that can be governed effectively. Otherwise, again, complexity increases. It's hard to instrument. You have no idea what's going on. And so that's very important, as to set up technical security controls, but also usage policies surrounding opening up those interfaces so that you can both incentivize organizations to develop services against those interfaces. But again, it's the implementation of those interfaces where attackers will go first, right? And that's almost always the intrusion vector. The main line attack that somebody's going to go after is the exposure of those interfaces and how those APIs have actually been implemented. You can large in part reduce that attack surface by a standard set of policies governing those interfaces, publishing those interfaces, and then again instrumenting them so you actually understand how APIs are being managed between those interfaces.
And the first question was that what should we protect actually? Is the network or the data or something else, or both of them? Who wants to answer that? Yeah, Marco, please.
Thank you for this question. Of course, every country has networks that need protection, so you need to protect them anyway. But as regards the question whether to protect networks or data or both of them, then this actually depends on the model that you have, that the country has chosen. Because, for example, if we look at the model in Estonia, when we use public internet to exchange information, like with the X-Road, then we need to protect the data. So, but also there are different models also available. For example, if you use closed networks to exchange information between government institutions, then in addition to data, you need to protect networks as well.
Any other comments?
ICT is just a tool coming to the basis, ICT is just a tool. We have to think about resilience of networks, resilience of information systems, but at the same time, we are protecting data and some systems, which their resilience is one of the objectives of the institution which is dealing with that.
I was just going to say, to me, I would change the question a little bit from the perspective that networks are data, right? And so the systems, the applications, the objects, the delivery systems and so forth, everything is data. And traditionally, there hasn't been a focus on protecting data at rest. So all the applications that are being used by a citizen so they can use and consume services, that's data. And by focusing on the data, data-centric protection and the integrity of that data, you assure the integrity of the infrastructure layer, the network layer, and then the data layer, the object storage systems, which are managing, that information that a user is generating. Everything's data. Wrapping a layer around that and then hoping that you catch a signature as it goes through some perimeter defense mechanism isn't enough anymore. You actually have to focus and consider everything within its data at rest state and then validate the integrity of that if you're going to assure the trustworthiness of the system.
I would like to make the question even more complex, because it's not only about the data networks, but these days, as Vitaly said, that these are just IT tools. But we, at least in Estonia, feel that we must protect the whole service, that the whole service where also people and processes are included. So that makes the game even more complex. Is there any other questions? We have time to take another one.
Yes, it's two questions. One exactly to our Deputy Minister from Moldova, and another one general. First of all, we have 100 viewers from Moldova who want to ask our Deputy Minister what they do after a big fraud from our internet provider when 100,000 of personal data from users go to the internet. It's mean ID, address, email address, and that's all, because our ministry doesn't do anything in this case. And to all, the question is who creates the policy of cybersecurity in your country and who implement it? Because in my country, we doesn't have this. Thank you.
Very good question, please.
I'm a little bit confused because the guy is from my country.
Yes, Eugen Lukeniuk from Moldova, a blogger from Moldova. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's almost was answered during my first introductory. Well, it's a big company, of course. It's not about 100,000, it's about 153,000 clients' personal data. Actually, I was involved in 2007, 2008 in adjusting internal legal framework, and we transposed in national legislation provisions of European Convention on Personal Data Protection. The first consequence on that company was that National Center for Personal Data Protection imposed some penalties on that company. They are not so essential, but the law is the law and it works. About the clients, some of them were ready to complain and to sue that company. Some of them did, some of them didn't. What should be expected from sectorial ministry in this regard? To close that company? This is not in. It will not serve our main objective to develop the market, to provide competition, and free competition on that market means that the clients can change their provider of service now. As a consequence of that incident, we have now a policy almost drafted, and we expect to have it approved soon in the government. In that policy document, there are some measures concerning the level of penalties, some measures concerning sharing responsibilities between different institutions. The main portfolio of Ministry of ICT is developing information society. At the same time, I was the guy too who in 2008 transposed in national legislation provisions of cyber crime convention. So that convention also created necessary legal framework in our country. So accordingly to that law, which is functional one, the guy who committed that crime was identified and have to go to trial and to face the consequences of what he did. So at this point, the legislation is in place, it works, some conclusions are made, and we are going forward in order to raise the level of protection of citizens, of business, and so on at next level. And this is just an example how in this situation we found necessary answers, and it was helpful for us in order to avoid some resistance from some traditional institutions which were ready to keep the situation as it is or to raise the security bar too high. So this is what I meant when I was talking about balance and equilibrium.
Yes, this is a very important question, actually, that how to ensure privacy and also confidentiality. And we can actually take the same question from the organizational or from the individual level to the state level. Because the recent years, internationally, there has been a lot of discussions about cyber spying and ensuring sovereignty in the cyberspace. How to say, thanks to Edward Snowden, we know that there are a lot of capabilities in the world that organizations are able to collect information from the very widely used systems like Facebook or Gmail or Dropbox or from others. And the response has been that countries have started to close their cyberspaces. And on one hand, it's really understandable that if you see the threat to your confidential information, you try to close the borders. Just like you see that in the physical world, that somebody is trying to come unofficially in your country, you try to tighten the border control. But on the other hand, we would like to enjoy the free global internet, having access pretty much everywhere, legally, authorized way. So the question is that how to ensure sovereignty in cyberspace and at the same time maintaining the free internet around the world. So what do you think about that? How countries can ensure the sovereignty? Because the issue is very simple. If a country doesn't produce hardware, don't develop software, if the country doesn't control its networks or have capabilities to react or prevent incidents, so the country is simply not sovereign in the cyberspace. And if the country doesn't even produce their own encryption systems, so we can consider these countries not sovereign in the cyberspace. So how to approach this issue? How to maintain sovereignty in the cyberspace like we do in the physical world? Let's start with Matthew. What do you think about that?
So it's interesting if you look at like the issues surrounding cyber, sovereignty. It revolves around two areas, and this was actually kind of highlighted, post Snowden and I guess the PRISM news at the 68th General Assembly at the UN is that most nation states really believe that they have a right to govern themselves internally, and that they also have a right to defend themselves. Regardless of whether or not that threat is coming from, an international kind of, global internet connection to their border. There's a challenge there, from the perspective that, global ICT supply chains, technologies come from a variety of countries, from a variety of different vendors and so forth. Countries don't have the budgets to spend on their own encryption and confidentiality solutions, their security systems, their access and authorization systems and so forth. And so, you really rely on this kind of global supply chain. And so from a policy and a practice perspective, countries seeking to assure, cyber sovereignty need access and understanding and insights into that supply chain. There have to be, agreed upon standards. And in fact, that's kind of what, the EU Commission has highlighted through Horizon 2020 is increased, publishing of interface standards, protocol standards, and so forth, demonstrated evidence and accreditation against those standards for ICT supply chains and for the technologies that countries would implement. And then the right, to that evidence as those connections are made to global MNOs and MVNOs, the telcos and the operators that are actually affording the interconnect between nation states. So I'm actually encouraged that, in light of this increased desire for data residency, for cyber sovereignty and so forth, there's now technology, standards, and policies that are all being considered which address, a nation's desire to both protect its borders but also its information and its citizens.
What about Moldova? How do you think about that? Should you kind of protect your digital borders the same way as you protect your physical borders?
No, this is impossible because cyberspace have no borders. It's about some borders in national services and content, but nothing more. Society wants to have access to other kind of services, to other kind of content from abroad, so we cannot impose some borders here. It's like McDonald's on the street. Population wants this service, and they have this service on this market. So on the same street, we have public authority building, which has another kind of activities. So speaking about sovereignty in cyberspace, I would not be so straight. This is one of the issues which can be interpreted. And what I mean saying that in 2012, International Telecommunication Union tried to adopt a new international telecommunication regulations. Most of the country in the world signed that new agreement. Some of them, about 80 countries, among them Moldova too. We didn't sign that regulations, that's new ITR, because of possibilities to interpret some notions. Fighting malicious content or spam, we can interpret under this definition unwanted or some content from different news agencies. For instance, Unimedia content can be qualified at some point, but the authority as spam and can be blocked by the authorities. This is not right. We should make a division between cables, networks, and between content, which is circulating there. So this is why discussions on cyber sovereignty will go on. It's quite hardly to impose some strict rules and some strict borders.
How is the situation in Georgia? Because you experienced the cyber attacks in conjunction with military operations.
Sure.
So you had at the same time attacks through the physical borders and to the cyberspace as well.
Sure.
So how you think about protecting your national cyberspace?
Actually, that's why we consider the protection of our cybersecurity, cyberspace, equally important as the protection of the whole state. But I'm totally in line with the colleagues that, of course, in comparison with the territory of the country, where you have physical borders, maritime boundaries, and then other tangible things to prevent the certain attacks, at least to try as much as you can, that this how to say activity in cyberspace is relatively very difficult. So in 2008, Georgia experienced the cyber warfare. Actually, that was the how to say there are certain how to say different positions, but I would argue that this was the first cyber warfare case in the history of the world, since it was simultaneously carried out with the physical hostilities waged by Russian Federation. And this, I would say, entailed very grave results for our national security, because they paralyzed the whole cyber systems, including public critical infrastructure and private critical infrastructure subjects. And thereby we started, how to say, the building up from the very beginning of our national security. And after that, we established a data exchange agency and then computer emergency response team that, how to say, after this year's also reacted on several incidents, cyber incidents. And thereby we are trying to, how to say, modernize our cybersecurity system, because in comparison with 2008, right now dependency on cyber systems is much more growing in Georgia and in the whole world, and in Georgia as well. And therefore, how to say, that taking into account that the results were really grave in 2008, that it can be much more grave, how to say, if it will be carried out today. And then therefore we are doing our best somehow to adequately respond, but ensuring the full-scale, full-fledged cyber sovereignty in cyberspace, I would say it's really difficult, and I would argue that it's impossible.
Marko, you deal with several countries in the world regarding cybersecurity. What do you think about that? Because of these recent revelations, should countries close down their digital borders and create similar borders as in the physical world?
I don't think that it's possible at all, because also just when I look at this question, then it triggers additional questions. First, how to define cyberspace, and then how to define sovereignty in cyberspace. Because yes, a government, a country can protect data which is stored inside the country, can protect information systems, and but this is not the whole cyberspace, because internet is borderless, and then most of the services, especially what individuals use, they are trans-border. And then also as regards different services, then that means that the communication information may pass different countries, different servers, different jurisdictions. So it's quite difficult to determine whose cyberspace it is. And also when people use different trans-border services, then again, if the data is stored somewhere abroad, sometimes also government can choose to use different cloud services, then again, you have a question that is it whose cyberspace it is, and then it's not difficult to answer this question. It's difficult to answer this question, but again, you need to think about what do you need to protect, and then protecting cyberspace as a whole, I think it's not very realistic. That means some sort of censorship or just some sort of internet border controls, which actually just confronts all these principles we stand for, the free flow of information and so on.
This brings us to the question of complexity that Matthew has already mentioned several times, that it seems to be that there are a lot of different complex questions, that what is cyberspace itself, how to maintain the capability to develop it, how we can maintain the knowledge, how to gain new knowledge, and how to have enough specific specialists who can deal with all these different technological solutions. So the question is that how can we maintain this complexity? And especially, it's again a question, I think, for the smaller countries, which especially are not too rich. And as Matthew has mentioned before, that the systems must be simpler and easier to maintain. So how can we do that? How countries can do that? If you don't have enough resources for everything, for all sorts of experts and knowledge development, how can we handle the complexity in the cyber world? Or should a country take simply a stand that if we don't have these capabilities, we simply don't invest in e-society development? Vitaly, what do you think about that?
Well, I mostly made my position clear. Yes, of course, this is a complex issue. We can't protect anything. We can't close borders. we have principles. In this order, we put, first of all, rights of users, rights to access information, obligation to the, or on the governmental body, first of all, to provide this access, to take care about resilience of the systems, at the same time to promote public awareness campaigns in order to bring to users the information that there are some minimal requirements on using this kind of services. When you leave your wallet on the market, it means that the same situation is when you leave your computer opened with passwords and so on sticked somewhere on the back of the computer. So the complexity of the situation was discussed during these sessions in first 3-4 questions. I just summarized and I made clear our position. Yes, of course, this is a complex issue, and we should deal with this very, very carefully in order to provide or to leave conditions for development, to attract people to use these instruments, and at the same time to impose necessary, minimal level of necessary measures in order to provide trust and confidence.
Matthew, when you develop new security systems, do you have in mind that the new systems must be simple and cheap and easy to maintain? Do you have this approach?
I don't know if, certainly not for like, critical data, right? I mean, you get what you pay for, right? On the one hand, the second, so if you are going to, if you're going to decrease the complexity, you first have to understand what you have, right? And I would argue that most governments and most multinational and transnational companies that we actually work with, they have no idea what they have because they aren't instrumented to actually understand, what resources they maintain and what state those resources are in. And without that level of instrumentation, you can't develop a governance framework that actually addresses what you believe those attack vectors are. So first you have to instrument, so you have situational awareness, you take an inventory of what you have, you understand the interfaces and the access and authorization policies associated with those interactions. You develop those granular controls against that governance framework, and then you reduce complexity, which in fact actually reduces IT and then CapEx spend over the long term because you're more efficient in the understanding of how to actually deliver services more securely, lowering barriers, and then again, incentivizing users to actually use those services because you've done that homework to make that resources available as possible.
Marco, as Matthew said, that it's actually very simple, that you get what you pay for. So does it mean that if a society can afford Mercedes, then the society must buy something else? I don't want to insult any car producers. That's basically as you said.
Okay.
If the society can not buy the cyber Mercedes, then maybe we should buy or be satisfied with, I don't know.
Estonia is the cyber Mercedes.
Cyber something, I don't know. What is the bad car?
No
I think
attribution.
that the solution, the answer is not so easy here because, as the question already says, that it's a complex issue, and you need to pay attention to several aspects, several elements, policies, technical, organizational, legal, and you need to think about human resources and cybersecurity. It's something which affects different legal regimes, different sub-policies, and so on. It's a complex issue, but countries, they just have to do it. And then the question is that how to do it. Countries are different, needs are different, available resources can be different. They need to find a way to do that, and because all these aspects need to be covered. Otherwise, you would implement cybersecurity only partially, but this is definitely not the solution.
Just to add to kind of what you're saying, I recently visited a country and had a great opportunity to visit a data center that was in charge of protecting some critical resources associated with a defense component. And you have the most expensive racks of equipment, right, that are all attached to nothing. and the point is that you can buy the most expensive box out there, but unless you've built a practice, an integration philosophy, and then a risk managed framework behind its use, and have smart administrators and users to actually contextualize what it is being reported from that system, it's useless, right? So you have to build a practice, and that starts with people.
Exactly. That's why we implemented the X-Road system and the digital ID and signature at the state level, just to solve the main security issue that others don't need to deal with it in different organizations. It saved a lot of money, and it's very, very effective. We don't have much time. Let's have just last question, and it concerns the near future. And before we have the question, please, let's have this short video clip. Driverless cars are not futuristic things. They already exist, and we're going to see them on the streets quite soon. And there are also other robotic things that we are going to see more and more. So very shortly, we don't have much time, if you can answer that, how do you see how government should deal with these issues in near future, in coming 10 years, sorry, Georgi?
There is how to say, there cannot be the exact answer, but the best formula in that regard would be the strong cooperation with the private partners who, I would say, made those products and then share their knowledge. So they are the best counterparts who can share all the necessary information and also necessary code of conduct in that field, I would say.
Marco, what do you think about
First, I think that when we are dealing with different things, objects like this, then we have to just redesign our legal framework, and also we need to think about how to treat them, and especially when something goes wrong. And then I think this is the challenge for the future.
Sure.
Vitaly?
Well, cars were not safe from the very beginning. Technology and security measures go hand by hand. So we have to keep the same level of, or to keep the same method in promoting ICT solutions like we did with cars. So constantly we have to think about safety, but at the same time not say that cars are not for humans.
Matt?
Driverless cars rely on software. That software, runs essentially on what is a big IoT sensor. That sensor is connected to a network, and the network, affords the ability to actually push new software to the vehicle. I would say, from an industry perspective, the industry's got to prepare for the government and government questions in the event of mishap by developing, clear capabilities that provide for the chain of custody of software through its development, delivery, and deployment lifecycle, so that in the event of mishap, you can identify exactly what's happened, when, where, and in what state that asset was, so that you can point back, from a lessons learned perspective, identify and hold accountable the responsible party, and then make better the network environment, the software, or the vehicle.
Okay, I know that I'll go a little bit over time, but we started 4 minutes later, so let's have a couple of questions, if there is any. Yes, there is one, and there is second, and that's all. So let's have the first question.
Andriy Moskalenko, Lviv City Council, Ukraine, and I have one simple question with hard answer. So what's your vision on creating system of protection? First, it's engaging IT specialists to city council, to minister, or maybe to work with special companies and create outside the system. Thank you. Question for Estonian, Georgian, and Moldova colleagues.
Okay, Estonian, Georgian, Moldovan. So
I think
Marko.
that cybersecurity is something which everybody has to be a bit responsible for. Not only private sector, but also governments need to think about that. And then also government, they need to invest in human resources. They need to have certain cybersecurity, information security experts, and the same applies for the private sector, and especially when we're talking about critical infrastructure. So everybody has to just pay attention to security issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will share the same position. We need to hear not only whole of government, but whole of society approach to cybersecurity issues. Therefore, the government, as a, how to say, main stakeholder, public stakeholder, of course, should create all the necessary conditions in order, how to say, the cybersecurity conditions to be ensured. But also, as for the practical implementation of cybersecurity measures, private stakeholders also are responsible to monitor and to control and to prevent as much as they can the negative processes in their own infrastructure. So this is the general answer. And as for the exact measures, how to do it, the capacity building, first of all, on human level. And this is then issue of utmost importance in that regard.
Especially for Moldova, we are evolving in that direction that we should impose some minimal requirements for public authorities, central public authorities, and some of private companies, because networks and service providers are mostly private companies. So the approach is to impose some minimal requirements on companies which are dealing with some segments of critical infrastructure. So if they are qualified to do that, they have access to do that. If they are not qualified, it means that they do not have access to that kind of services.
Okay, thank you. And the second question was?
I'm John Shimandeni, representing the government of Namibia. My question is that it's true, I want to agree that it's true that cybersecurity or cyber threats are borderless. It's also true that it might be complex to control. But then again, it's also true that countries develop different policies and legal framework to protect their infrastructures. But then again, the question is that if someone sits in Georgia and commit a crime, a cyber crime in Moldova, or maybe in Estonia and commit a crime in Namibia, how do you deal with that jurisdictional issues? Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Georgi and Marko can also probably answer that.
Yeah, so thanks for this question. Actually, this is a very interesting question. In that regard, the best solution is international police and judiciary cooperation networks. So what we, I would say, have right now, Georgia, Moldova, and Estonia, including US, also is the member of the Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime. So there are 24/7 international cooperation network. And police-to-police cooperation, I would say, is done by these networks. As for the cooperation into the investigation phase, I mean into the exchanging evidences, so this is done by judiciary networks. The best formula in this regard is international cooperation, because the data necessary in order to solve my criminal case that I'm dealing with right now in my country, maybe it's stored in Moldova in one server located in Moldova, and of course I have a jurisdictional barrier to search and seizure those server that is located in Moldova. Therefore, I should address to my Moldovan counterparts, and they will do all the best in order to help these cases. And in practice, I would argue that in practice, since I have a police background as well, in practice those networks worked, how to say, very fruitfully, and how to say, the majority of the cases the Georgian law enforcement agencies solved. I would say in majority of those cases, the role of foreign law enforcement officers were enormous, I would say.
Last very short comment.
Firstly, I would like to say that as we have seen, also global statistics show that most of the cybercrimes are of international nature. So they are transborder. And no, the example you brought, it's quite simple that you have a suspect in one country, maybe victim in another country. But there can be also more difficult, complicated situations where you need to deal with third countries who, for example, have servers where the electronic evidence are contained. So the solution here is to have effective international cooperation. That means first, all these countries need to have some sort of legal basis in place. That means that cybercrime in Estonia is also cybercrime in Namibia and so on. And then it's using different international agreements, different cooperation channels to get the evidence and bring the criminal to justice.
It is a very good idea to end the panel with the idea that let's have more international cooperation in the field of cybersecurity. In my little cybersecurity field, the panels usually last not 1.5 hours, but at least 3 or more hours. But unfortunately, we have to stop here because we have other workshops after that panel as well. So thank you for all panelists. Great thoughts. Thank you for the questions. And let's have a big applause to the panelists.